Are we all set?
You're set.
Okay. All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Berwick Planning Board meeting for Thursday, June 18th, 2020. If we could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, just want to do a quick mic check. Frank, can you hear us? Frank, can you hear us? Sean, can you hear us?
No.
Is it because we're on mute and the video hasn't started? Down at the bottom of the screen? Do we have to unmute?
It is the BCTV account itself have to unmute?
Are you guys putting in your apartment? Is that why you're here? Cool. Finally. Good.
All right, Frank, can you hear me?
Great time.
Frank, can you hear us?
I can hear you now.
Okay, Sean, can you hear us?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
All right, perfect. Just wanted to check on that first. So, all right, the board members present tonight. The only one here in the board room tonight is me. On the Zoom call here, we have Frank and we have Sean. So we have a quorum tonight in the boardroom. We have the town planner James here, and we have the code enforcement officer Jennifer here, and we have a couple members of the public as well. Members present, not present tonight, is the Vice Chair Nicole Fecto, also alternate David Ross Lyons, and regular Michael LaRue. Moving on to public comment. Public comment session is open to any member or any resident or property owner in the town of Berwick to come forward to the podium and talk about anything that relates to the planning board. Public comment session is open. Feel free to come forward if you're here for public comment.
And I have no emails.
No emails, nobody in the waiting room for public comment?
Nope.
Okay, seeing nobody come forward, close the public comment session. Moving on to the approval of minutes for the May 21st, 2020 meeting. I do have one email that came from David Ross Lyons, and he says he wants to mention the minutes from the 5/21 meeting. He says he did not abstain from voting on the landscaping waiver. He actually opposed that. You got that?
Yeah, it's fixed. I updated it on Word, and then instead of saving a new PDF,
Okay.
I uploaded the old PDF, so that's why it didn't change at that time.
Okay. So we'll consider this amended minutes.
Yeah.
Anybody else see anything from the May 21st meeting? Frank, you weren't at you were there at the 5/21 meeting, right?
Yes, but when you guys took these up at the 6/4 meeting, Sean and I both were not present. And I think the people that were present at the meeting didn't give you enough of a majority that had attended that.
Correct. We had
5/21.
we only had
Sean
two.
and I are here with you, so we can do that this evening. I'm
Correct. Do you see any other additions, Frank or Sean?
No, I didn't see anything else on the 5/21 meeting minutes.
Okay.
I'll move that we accept the minutes as stated with the correction on David Ross Lyons' vote.
I'll second.
Okay. For further discussion. Okay. All in favor? Roll call. Frank.
Yes.
Sean.
Yes.
And I vote yes, so that's 3-0. So for the June 4th minutes, I know both of you weren't here for June 4th.
Correct.
Okay, so we're going to just sit on these for right now, and we'll just move along. So we'll put that on the agenda for the next meeting, James.
Can I just ask one question? James, do you know, because the big item on that was the 11 Pond Road, do you know when they're scheduled to come back onto our agenda? Have they made any mention of that yet?
July 16th. We're going for July 16th. We've consulted Phil, Lee J, and we have a third-party engineer lined up as well. We go through for Tidewater Engineering. They did the third-party engineer for the Industry Drive project.
So we will see them July 16th.
Yep. Unless the third-party review doesn't come through, then it'd be pushed back to that August meeting.
Are we going to see that third-party review before the 16th?
That's the goal.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, if it's not, then it'd be pushed back.
Okay.
Because I don't think we've had a full chance to offer up our comments on that as well, if I remember right.
We did last week, or 2 weeks ago, Frank.
I got a few more. If I have an opportunity, I'll gladly raise the questions
Okay.
at the time.
So we will not act on the minutes for June 4th, 2020. Next on the agenda is a presentation from Christy Rabaska. I'm sorry if I say this wrong, Rabaska. It's on the MS4 Permanent Land Use Ordinance Amendments. Do we have a presentation?
Oh yeah, you're
Oh,
muted.
there she is.
You're muted, Christy. There you go, perfect. You gotta unmute yourself. Good.
All right, welcome, Christy.
And hopefully you can all see my screen, which shows that I'm going to give you a 2020 stormwater permit update.
We see it.
Great. Hopefully this won't take more than about 10 minutes. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Christy Rabaska. I work for Integrated Environmental Engineering, and I work with the town of Berwick, helping them to implement Clean Water Act permit for their separated stormwater discharges. So the permit that I help the town implement is called the general permit for stormwater discharges from municipal separate storm sewer systems. And this permit, Berwick's been subject to this permit since 2003. It's administered by the Maine Department of Environmental Protection. And the Maine DEP and the EPA decided to regulate municipalities for their separated stormwater discharges because people living in close proximity to one another, as the planning board is well aware, when they develop properties, they create impervious surfaces. And then living in close proximity, they tend to generate a lot of pollutants that build up. And when it rains, all those pollutants, as are shown in this cartoon on the right-hand side of the slide, all those pollutants get washed off into storm drains, ditches, and directly out into the waters of the state. So the way that the EPA and the DEP decided to regulate these communities, or decide which communities become regulated and which ones don't, is using US Census data. So the census data that we're operating under now is the 2000 plus the 2010 census data. Not have to incorporate the 2020 census data. It won't be available for another year and a half, and we've got a little leapfrogging going on. So we don't have to worry about the 2020 census data for a few years now. But this graphic shows the town of Berwick, and that the regulated area is right where you would expect it to be, the high population area, which is in the center of town and right along the Salmon Falls River.
Christy, just one question is, on the New Hampshire side, Rochester, Somersworth, Rollinsford, are they MS4 communities?
They are.
Okay, thank you.
And in fact, when I show this slide for other communities, usually the red regulated areas touch each other, but it looks like there's a big jump between South Berwick, and that's because the red area, the regulated, these urbanized areas do jump across the border. And so yes, Rollinsford and Somersworth are all regulated, and all the way down to Portsmouth, all along the river, and then well into New Hampshire also. And so then in Maine, there are 29 other towns and cities that are regulated by this permit. You'll see South Berwick is. I do work for the town under a regional contract with Berwick, South Berwick, York, Kittery, and Elliott through Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission. And we kind of labeled ourselves the Southern Maine Stormwater Working Group. Most communities that band together for cost-saving measures like this call themselves Stormwater Working Groups. It's a rather informal organization. So we're the Southern Maine Stormwater Working Group. And up in the Portland area, for the ordinance work that I'm going to talk to you about today, we are also teaming with the 14 of the regulated Portland area communities who call themselves the Interlocal Stormwater Working Group, or ISIWIG. So we're doing some teaming with them, which I'll talk about in just a minute. So this permit, it's a little bit of a permit update and a little bit of, some update for these ordinances that you guys are going to be seeing over the next couple of years, ordinance changes required by the stormwater. So we are still operating under a permit that was issued in 2013 and was supposed to expire in 2018. But the permit's overdue. The DEP has received a lot of comments, most recently from the EPA, from Casco Bay Estuary Partnership, Friends of Casco Bay, Conservation Law Foundation, and all the municipalities have chimed in, commenting on the permit. We've seen 10 other drafts, and we're gonna see an 11th draft. We were supposed to see it on Monday and Tuesday, never saw it. But so this delay is, you know, I'm just not sure what's gonna happen. We were supposed to see this permit. Hopefully we do see it in the next day or so, and if we do, it should get finalized fairly quickly, and then the next permit cycle will become effective on July 1st, 2021. So you're kind of like, well, that's great. Why are we talking about something that hasn't even happened yet? Well, I mean, we've seen 10 drafts of this permit, and in those 10 drafts, there are ordinance change requirements that really have not changed from draft to draft. So that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. And in particular, the permit says that these ordinance changes are going to have to become effective by June 30th of 2022. So I know we know it takes a long time for ordinances to get approved and changed. So we want to provide ourselves a lot of time. So we do have money in the budget to start working at that over the next permit year. So I have basically 3 changes I just wanted to review with you tonight. And the first one is, I'll just read this. It's straight from the permit. The town must have an ordinance or other regulatory mechanism that requires the use of erosion and sediment control best management practices at construction sites. And then the key, like you guys already have that, but the key is that are consistent with the minimum standards outlined in Appendix C of our permit. So we have basically 8 pages that are Appendix C that are just a bulleted list extracted from Chapter 500 for the most part. This is kind of the state pushing this requirement down on the municipalities. So we have to embed these technical erosion and sediment control standards. You know, we've got a few ways we can do it, but basically effectively embed them in the ordinances somehow. So I did do a review of the, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, this says Elliot, that's very embarrassing.
When we embed them into our ordinance, does it go into the sewer district ordinance, or does it go into the town's land use ordinance?
So it's gonna go into, there's 2 places, the ones I looked at, one was subdivision ordinances. The text here is correct. So one is the subdivision ordinances will need to be amended. You do have performance standards in subdivision regulations. Right? Section 11.5 of your subdivision regulations does reference Appendix A that has some technical standards in it, but really not, they're mostly for design. They're not for the construction phase erosion, sediment and erosion control requirements. And then the land use ordinance does have a number of references. You do have some good recommendations. The small sites for the land use ordinance, 7.17 says that everything must be done in accordance with Chapter 500, which is great. But the larger sites, you say that the sediment and erosion control plans that are completed have to be done in accordance with Maine DEP sediment and erosion control BMP manual dated 2003. And that's been updated since then, so we do need to update that reference. And you do have that same reference, that 2003 document referenced for like mineral industry and campgrounds, and there are a few others. So basically, James and I are gonna have to go through the ordinances and just, you know, figure out where to make those changes and do some red line strikeouts for you.
But nothing in the sewer district ordinance or sewer district?
I will look at it. It was not on my radar to look at, so.
I only asked the question because if it's applicable, they have to run it through their process because they're a separate charter in the town.
Yeah, they're not regulated by this permit, so their ordinances don't necessarily have to change.
But EPA in their last NPDES round of permits managed to slide some stormwater stuff into it. So that's why I'm just saying it's worth asking the question.
I know they did for nitrogen and, yeah.
Right.
They didn't pull districts into this right now, it's only the municipalities, so. So, you know, because there's so many other communities that are regulated, we are trying to team on these ordinance changes. We're gonna go through the 8 pages in the appendix. And we've basically, oh, I keep hitting the enter button. We're developed an ordinance committee, and we're gonna be looking at the possibility of creating a standalone ordinance for sediment and erosion control that then the Berwick ordinances could reference that. Or we might create a separate, a lot of communities do this, they have a separate standards document, either for the community or for the region, like we might wanna do it for all 5 communities, and talk about how sediment and erosion control should be done for all 5 communities or all 29, should all the MS4s agree. And the last one would be if you guys want to have these new standards embedded in your ordinances, the ordinance committee will be creating a checklist that planning staff could use as they go through the ordinance and, you know, decide what the updates are. So some of the things that aren't in your ordinances now are specifics like make sure that the contractor has a stabilized construction entrance. Make sure that the contractor is actually doing weekly inspections on their own BMPs at the construction site. Like those things aren't required by municipal ordinance now, so they are gonna be required by municipal ordinance now. So the last little bit that I wanna say about this specific change, number 1, is that Abby Sherwin of Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission, she's also on the Governor's Climate Change Council, and she's been looking at changes to Chapter 500 to incorporate coastal resiliency concepts. And so we did team and received a grant from the Maine Coastal Program to look at coastal resiliency issues and try to embed them as options for you guys to adopt if you'd be interested. I know you're not technically a coastal community, but there may be some little gems that you decide as a planning board you want to incorporate into your specific requirements. So those will be the 3 options. You'll be seeing more of this, I think, over the next 2 years as James and I go through the ordinance committee and start to develop some of these things. You'll be seeing some more options. So the second change is that the town has a post-construction part of their land use ordinances. Section 7.23 is basically post-construction requirements. I believe you're very familiar with this as the planning board. When somebody develops more than an acre of land or disturbs more than an acre of land and they're going to maintain their own stormwater infrastructure, they have to then certify back to the town that they're going to maintain that stormwater infrastructure. So somebody has to do the maintenance on it. So that's what this ordinance is all about. And they're supposed to be doing inspections, and if they find issues, they have to correct them. Well, right now, the ordinance is silent on how long they have to make those corrections. So one of the new permit requirements is that they're going to be limited to getting those done within 60 days. Unless it's some huge capital project, and then they could work with James or Codox or Jennifer to, you know, basically negotiate or establish what they're calling an expeditious schedule to get things done if it's going to take longer than 60 days for some capital expenditure.
What if they don't get it done? Is there a penalty provision? Is there a way to assess or lien the property and the town does it and lien the property? I mean, are all those mechanisms in play?
In the, yes, they are in that ordinance, yes. Notices of violations and fines, and I don't believe that liens is currently on the property, but there is a provision to, wouldn't be fun, but a provision to ask them to cease and desist using the town's storm drain system, which would cause flooding, and I'm not sure anybody's ever invoked that, nor would they. Likely, for sure. So yeah, there are penalties incorporated in that. Any other questions on that section? So the last thing is that the most recent comments that the DEP got on their permit, on the draft of their permit, were from the EPA, and the EPA kind of threw them a little curveball and said, we'd like to see more requirements around low impact development. And we have no idea what the DEP is doing with that comment from the EPA, how strong-handed EPA is being with that comment, but again, we should see the final language here in the next few days. And we really, I mean, I know you guys have some nice language in your land use ordinance right now, saying that you strongly encourage and prefer green infrastructure to be installed, so that's great, but we may need to be making some changes to that. So we probably won't start the ordinance committee work until August or September, and we are very hopeful that the permit will be finalized then, so we know definitively what our language is. So that's it. I really just wanted to bring to your attention the fact that you're going to be seeing some ordinance changes over the next 2 years, that I'll be working with James and the other planners in the area, along with the folks in the Portland area, and Abby Sherwin at Southern Maine Planning and Development. We'll be bringing you some options to review and discuss as they become available, and that we do need to finalize those ordinances by June 30th of 2022.
Let's shoot for June 30th of 2021.
All right. Any other questions from the board? Frank, you got anything else?
No, I'm good, Dave. Thank
Sean,
you.
do you have anything?
No, I'm all set.
All right. Thank you, Christy.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Thanks.
And I'm going to try to unshare.
Bye.
There we go.
All right, next on the agenda is site plan review, multifamily, adding 1 unit to make 3 total, 55 School Street. It is lot U3-1. It's in the CI zone and Village Overlay District, and the applicant is Andrea Burns. I'll turn it over to James.
All right, so Andrea is proposing to construct a 812 square foot 2-bedroom apartment in an existing building. Because it's the 3rd unit, the project is considered a multifamily dwelling, and that requires site plan review. But because the 2 units have been in existence for longer than 5 years, it doesn't require subdivision approval. So that simplifies things a little bit for us. Like I mentioned, the unit is proposed to be an existing attached house barn that is currently permitted for an antique and collectible business. Ms. Burns has requested the antique business to be moved to an existing 1-car garage. So we can decide to act on both, or if you just want to act on one at a time, it's up to you guys. Ms. Burns requested a rezone request. If you remember a couple of years ago, we included 55 School Street along with a couple other lots into the Village Overlay District. Andrea requested a waiver for a lot of the site plan review requirements, and she submitted a sketch that has been reviewed by the Berwick Fire Department, and Andrea is well aware of, I mean, Dennis had some comments, or it seemed like those were squared away, and I think.
Yeah, no, he said we were all set. We have the exits and the egresses and the.
Actually, we can't hear you right
Oh,
now
sorry.
because you're not on mic. I'll turn it over to you after James is done.
Sorry. So Andrea initially did request a waiver for low impact design statement, and I talked to her, and Dave, I think you have a copy of this. She actually
I do.
did submit some drainage, and you guys can't see it. I got it today, but she did propose some a low impact design that will help with the stormwater from her parking area. Her parking area is already existing gravel, and Andrea can get into more detail on what she has in mind for the area. But since it's already impervious, I think that would be sufficient. A good part.
Hold on a sec, Frank.
Yep.
All right.
So, so I'll go over the waivers. A map or maps including a perimeter survey, and that map includes existing and proposed infrastructure, landscaping, and topography. That's 9.8, F, 2, B, 1 through 7. She also requested a waiver for letters to the town departments. That's a site plan review requirement. So it would be those two waivers, and then discussing if her submitted drainage passes the low impact design statement, which I think it would. And then a good portion of the rest of the site plan review and village overlay district requirements, I believe, are not applicable because no construction is proposed. So that the type of construction, floor area, and proposed buildings is not applicable. And erosion and sediment control plan and stormwater management plan. The parking area is already considered impervious and is proposed to be further compacted. And I think Andrea can get into detail on those drainage details. So that's what I have.
Do you have a copy of this parking drainage on email that you can send to Frank and Sean?
Hold it up to the right.
No, it's reversed, so
You don't have it on email?
no.
Okay. Okay. All right, Miss Burns, come on up. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's been a long road to get here. My name's Andrea Burns. I live at 55 School Street. We are proposing to add an additional apartment on the first floor of an existing carriage house / barn. There is an apartment existing on the second floor. It's been there since the 1970s. The space was previously on a conditional use for an antique shop. So I think you have the layout. So we are not building anything outside the structure. We're just renovating the interior space. It's pretty much what we're doing. I've already spoken to Jay Wheeler for sewer. I submitted a copy of the form he gave me because all the sewer and plumbing tie-ins are above ground. We're not doing anything new. It falls in Jennifer's purview. So basically all we have to do is pay the equity buy-in fee, and that's pretty much it. Just let them know we're doing another unit, so
Okay.
we'll be billed for an additional unit for
Right.
sewer. And I believe that happens just before we get our occupancy
Correct.
permit.
Yep.
So I'll coordinate with Jen. So I think the only other thing that was in question was the drainage. The space that's there, we've used it for parking. It's just basically packed dirt in the spring because our property sets into a hill. It comes down the hill and it flattens out where the parking area is. And in the spring, it becomes mud bog 3000. So we're planning on digging that down, putting in a base of 3/4 inch stone. And we were looking at topping it with a couple of inches of hard pack. In talking to James, we thought we might go with crushed stone instead. But where the hill comes down and it flattens out, we're planning on digging a drainage ditch and putting in perforated pipe and the 3/4 stone that will go the whole length of the driveway past the little garage and empty out into, anything that would empty out would go into the backyard, which is all just grass and trees. So,
Okay. Frank, questions?
Yeah, the only one I had was, I thought she had also asked for a waiver on the boundary survey. And I think because there's nothing dealing with an expansion or whatever, we're really not concerned with setbacks or anything else. And the back side is to the police station, I believe, and that's a boundary plan that's already been recorded. And I think the front yard is the DOT right away, and that's been recorded, so.
and then the other side
if
is
that ends up being a request for a waiver, I think we could grant that.
the other side is the Bateman. I don't know what they call it now, but the high school,
Yeah.
old school
The apartments, yeah, high school apartment, yeah.
I'm not sure exactly what the
I
name
know.
of it is now. So
Anything else, Frank?
No, that's it, all I had.
Sean?
No, I didn't have anything. She pretty well explained what was going on with the parking area, and I think, it's a good idea to catch any runoff that comes down the little hill towards the parking before it gets there, so
Yeah, that's,
I think that seems like a pretty good plan for this location right now.
oh, and I think the other thing was the fire. They said they couldn't hear me. I did meet with, Dennis Plant came over on Monday and, walked through, and we went through everything. There's multiple egresses. We will have, it's already hardwired for smoke and CO2. So I don't know if you received anything, James. Dennis said he would send you something that said what we were proposing is fine with them.
Yeah, he
as far
just
as
sent a
fire
letter
safety.
saying he's reviewed it and
Yeah. So,
Okay.
so I don't know if you have any other questions.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, so tonight we can act on this application to find it complete, but first, before we do that, we have to vote on the waiver requests. So the first waiver request is for a map or maps including a perimeter survey, existing and proposed infrastructure, landscaping, and topography. Well, normally I don't make motions, but I'll make a motion that we waive 9.8.f.2.b.1 through 7.
I would have made it, but I didn't have the number of the orders. I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Further discussion. Okay, roll call vote. Frank Underwood,
Yes.
Sean Winston,
Yes.
and I vote yes, so that's 3-0. Okay. Next on the next waiver is letters to town departments.
Dave, do we need the letters? I mean, she's already stated that the fire chief has looked at everything, so
And
he's
that's,
supposed to send a letter.
what's that?
I guess he was supposed to, was supposed to be sending a letter
He,
already?
it says that, according to this, if you look at the memo that James presented, he says he's reviewed the plan and has submitted a letter to the file. Do you have that letter, James?
I don't. Yeah, I have it. I mean, I have it in next door.
Okay, but you don't have it
It's just
electronically.
like a one sentence. He reviewed it. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I'll make a motion that we can waive the requirement for letters to the town departments, even though I guess we already have one technically letter from the fire department. I wouldn't see a need to get a letter from
A letter from who?
no need to get anything from the police department, and it sounds like the sewer department's already on board, so.
What about is the water a single meter that will meter the house and the two apartments?
Yes,
Andrea?
yeah, it currently is. It's a single meter that meters the current house and apartment. So it's all
Do
one.
you need to tell them you're adding a unit or not?
Nobody-
I mean, the sewer district billing structure is entirely different on a unit basis, but
Yeah.
I know the water department. I think
Water
is-
just goes by usage, so when we add a second apartment, however much water we use is what we'll pay for.
So it's consumption.
Yeah, it's all by consumption.
Okay, so we have a motion for a waiver for letters to town departments. We have a second.
I'll second that.
Okay, further discussion. All right, Frank Underwood
Yes.
and Sean Winston,
Yes.
and I vote yes, that's 3-0. Okay, so, the low impact design statement, we do have this parking drainage, and I wish that you could see it, but I think that the applicant has explained it to you. Do you have any questions on that? I mean, I don't even know if we have to go forward with this waiver right now necessarily.
It sounds like they're just trying to control their own drainage within their own site, and that in fact it's not really adding any more impervious to it. It's just that they've had kind of a seasonal problem or whatever, and they're
Yeah.
just trying to remedy that and shedding it to the back, so
I mean, there's no new construction. They're not putting pavement down. They're not, I don't see a need to even act on the low impact design statement.
I would agree with that, Dave. I don't see that there's a need to waive that. I don't think it's an issue for this project.
Okay, would you like to withdraw that waiver?
Oh,
Waiver request?
sure.
Okay.
Yes.
All right,
It just
so-
so it seems so much things that weren't applicable because we're not building anything.
Correct. This is, yeah.
It's an oddball situation. We initially thought we could just get
Yep.
once we had our zoning change, we could just get a building permit, and then it said, oh, now that we've gone
Mm-hmm.
to 3 units, we have to come back before the planning board. So, here
All
we
right.
are.
Next, we're going to, would be voting on whether or not the application is complete and determine if a site walk is needed.
I'll make a motion that we determine that the application for 55 School Street is complete.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
Seconded by Sean. Okay, further discussion. Roll call. Frank Underwood.
Yes?
Sean Winston.
Yes.
And I vote yes. All right. Do we want to do a site walk?
I don't, I've been staying away from sidewalks, if you've noticed, guys. I'm older.
I don't feel the need to do a site walk because there's no new construction and we don't have to look at anything really.
Yeah, I would agree.
And even if we do get to look at the drainage thing, you can just drive by and you can probably just eyeball the thing. and
You
see
can,
what it's
yeah,
all about.
you can kind of see where the hill comes down and it flattens out, and kind of right where those two meet is where the drainage is going,
Yeah.
so.
But we do need to schedule a public hearing. What's the next meeting?
July 18th.
July 18th and 16th, you said,
Oh, yeah, whatever.
right? July 8th, no, it is,
Let me check the schedule. I think it's the 16th.
because you kept saying July 16th.
It's whatever.
You kept sending people to Channel 98, the French channel, for a long time.
July 16th.
I did.
July 16th.
July
Yeah,
16th.
16th.
All right, so we'll schedule a public hearing for July 16th at 6:30 right here. Okay?
Okay,
Does that work for you?
yes.
All right.
Andrea, did you ever talk to Freddie Manuel on the structural?
I think Rick might have,
Okay.
I'm not sure. He was in charge of that part of it.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Burns.
Well, the other question was, we do have the conditional use for
Mm-hmm.
the antique shop, that we'd like to move that to the little garage.
Yep, I think this is covered under the application because you have it on the application, so.
Oh, okay, so that,
Yeah.
And the use stays with the property.
right, yeah,
All right.
okay. And nothing of that use is changed, just the location. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda is conditional use application, adult use marijuana storefront and adult use cultivation facility, 468 Portland Street. It is lot R71, or map R71, lot 7. It's in the RCI zone, and the applicant is Herbal Pathways. James, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. All right. So BCTV, you can let in Leah, please. All right. So Herbal Pathways proposed to repurpose a 6,720 square foot manufacturing facility into an adult use cultivation facility and storefront. I don't know how they did it, but they found a site that's 1,000 feet from everything else that's going on Portland Street. The site will be serviced by an existing parking area, septic, and well. All waste will be locked in a dumpster located toward the back of the property and will be screened. Herbal Pathways will have a maximum of 7 employees on site during the largest shift and will employ 14 in total. The cultivation facility is proposed to operate from 8 to 5 p.m. and the storefront from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Very detailed security and odor control plans have been submitted. An interior floor plan has also been submitted, which meets the requirements of section 8.25, and in particular the cultivation to storefront ratio requirement. The letter from the fire chief has been received, and his only recommendation was to add a Knox box. And these folks, they went an extra step and they performed a traffic study. They were aware of our concerns on the added traffic to Route 4. I can read a little bit of that. I think the big thing for them from this third-party traffic study review was that because the speed limit is 55 miles an hour, they recommended a site distance minimum of 550 feet, and they recommended not having any signage or landscaping that gets in the way of that site distance. And a waiver for the LID was proposed, and then I talked with Atar, who's here tonight, and actually they submitted a low impact design stuff on the site, and I'll let Brian get into that.
Are you done?
I am done.
All right. All right, come on up. Just want to make sure that you're done before we turn it over to the applicant.
I appreciate. I need to have I need a period on my statement.
Right.
Just kind of trails off.
It's fine.
Leave your laptop the other way, look at the screen.
Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, good. So, you guys are great. Usually I have to go through all of that myself, so I'm not really sure what to do other than explain the low impact design. So James got a hold of us, and
Could you state your name
Oh, I
and for the record?
apologize.
That's okay.
Yes, so
for our
my
viewers at
name's-
home,
my
we're a
name's
very
Brian.
highly rated program on Thursday nights.
Totally understand. So my name's Brian Nielsen of Attar Engineering, and I'm here representing Herbal Pathways. Ken Crowley is also here. He is the client from Herbal Pathways. And so the low impact design we're suggesting is a bioretention cell. Sounds really fancy, but generally it's a 6-inch depression in the ground that collects local stormwater, and below that is a kind of a natural filtration system of mulch and other specific soils, falls eventually down into some perforated pipe, travels underground for a few hundred feet, and then discharges out and basically into the backyard. And it's a MDEP approved LID BMP, so that's really it. So if I take any questions related to that, if there are.
Okay. Let's start with Sean.
No questions right now, Dave. I just really kind of getting into going through the drawings and so forth.
Okay, Frank.
Yeah, just a couple. I looked at the site plan that was submitted, and I also went back and I looked at the civil engineering, civil consultant site plan that was part of the original submission years back. Nowhere around there do I see a septic system location. And I'm curious as to, can that be shown? Can we look at the existing HHE 200 to see what the design criteria was for that system, and whether or not there was a reserve area set aside for that system? And then the other thing is, I'd like to have a discussion with the board at some point. The last cultivation facility that we had, we were taking their processed water and they were putting that in a holding tank that was going to be limited and monitored and pumped on a regular basis. And I don't know if that's going to be our standard for these types of facilities, that they provide a separate holding tank for that discharge. But most of my questions are around the septic component. And then the other thing is looking at the purchase and sales agreement, which really is between other parties. But I was curious as to why there were two sections in there that were crossed out. Section XIX 19 and section 36. XXXVI. So just curious as to why those were crossed out, whether it needs to have any bearing on it. If James could just find out, I see that the town is in a butter to this property. They're listed on the list, so I'm not sure what the town's property is down there. So we can talk about that later. And then I noticed you've got the two pending state licenses, and they're issued, but they're not a license to operate. One I think says it's for adult use store, and I'm assuming that's a retail application. And then the other one is, they've got numbers on them. ACC 221 is an adult use cultivation license. I'd be curious as to stay on top of what the status of those are, when they would be issued, and whether or not there are individual licensing fees that the state has for each of those licenses, because the town will be dealing with license fees, and I'd just like to know a little bit more about how the state is charging fees for these licenses. So that's pretty much it, Dan.
Okay.
All right, so that was quite a bit. I can at least speak to the septic. I'll double check the plan. 1 second, I've got it behind me.
James, I saw that. The town owns property there? I never saw that on.
Did you just kind of include it in the list just because the town, does the town own property there? Who put together the abutters list?
I'm not positive.
I've never seen that on a list of town-owned property.
Neither. Maybe just include it as the town is an interested party.
But it actually specifies a lot.
Oh,
Here's the lot number, 4A1 on map 71.
71-4.
Yeah, I'm seeing it on the plan, 11 Sullivan Street, Berwick, Maine. So, 32 Old Route 4. I don't know what that property is, but it's across the street from the driveway.
Okay, we'll have to look into that. I've never seen it on a. Anyway, go ahead.
So the septic isn't called out specifically, and I'll remedy that, but it is to the. So if you're facing the building, it's to the left. It's between the left side of the building and that left property line. But I'll make sure that's called out specifically on the plan, and I'll get some more of the details from the existing HHE 200 and see if there is a reserve area.
Yeah, because I'm not sure also what the flow criteria, I don't recall, but is the design flow greater for what you're proposing there with the number of employees? That would be the question. So,
I believe the max number of employees, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ken, is 7, which,
correct.
Anecdotally I can say I can't imagine it's going to be much different than what the existing use is, but I will make sure.
What was the building in there before? What was the use?
I talked to them briefly. It was some sort of chemical engineering, I believe, but I'll double check.
Ken Crowley, do you know?
Yeah, it's a small manufacturing, analytical stuff that he does, and machines and stuff like that right now.
How many people do you know how many people he had employed there?
I've seen 2. I do not know if there's others. I know it's a very small, really just a couple people own that business.
Just trying to line up the design flow for the use of that existing system, that's all.
Right. But we're gonna be using aeroponic systems, meaning that the water isn't discharged every day like if someone was watering plants by hand or with a drip system. The aeroponics sprays the bottom of the plant, and you can use that water over and over again. And then we could put it into a barrel and have it evaporate. It doesn't evaporate.
I guess my focus was just on if there is a process type water that's potentially going to be discharged, how is that handled? On the other facility they have a holding tank and they're going to pump it periodically, but just want to know what you're going to do.
We could put a holding tank in place for the aeroponic solution. It's an organic solution and just water, so there's no dirt, no cocoa, nothing like that. So there's nothing else that has to be discharged or getting rid of.
We'll just wait and see what you propose.
Okay.
All right. In relation to the PNS, I am not able to speak to that right away, but I can find out. The same for the state licenses. Ken, are you, or Lee, are you able to speak to either of those questions?
I don't know if Lee is on. Oh, okay.
No, but please, Ken, go ahead.
The conditional license are in place. They've been paid for to the state. And then what I'm hearing is the state may not do final license until August or September.
And
Okay.
there's a fee for each of the permits, for each of the
Yes, sir.
licenses?
Yes, sir.
And are we consistent with that, James, or aren't we that far ahead in the town?
Starting July 14th, when the town adopts the ordinance, the marijuana ordinance, we'll have a licensing, and that will be 2 licenses.
Okay. Thank you, James.
Okay.
All right. I believe that's, and the other item is the PNS, the 2 sections, so it was XIX and 36 are both crossed out.
Yeah, 19 and 36.
19 and 36. I don't have the PNS in front of me.
I do not either, sorry.
That's all right.
What does it say?
One deals with disclosures, and it has to do with lead and some of those things, but the other one deals with sex offender.
Okay. I pulled that up off the main thing for doing it, I did it before I had attorneys. And so, but the gentleman, that is part of that lease agreement that you can pull up on the state website. And he asked me to take those out.
I'm just making sure we don't have any felons or anybody like that that's gonna be down for.
Nope, I've already passed my criminal background check. I am not a sex offender or any of those. I didn't take it out. The guy asked for those to be taken out.
All right.
And that's on the state website when you pull up a lease like that. So it's already in that.
I wasn't gonna give you the descriptions, but you asked for them, so.
Yeah, no, that's fine. No, I didn't have it in front of me. That's fine.
Okay, Frank, do you have any other questions?
No, I'm good, David, thank you.
Okay, Sean?
Right.
No, I'm good right now.
Okay, so the next steps ahead, James, we have no waivers requested for this. Okay, so the next steps ahead would be to vote voting on whether or not the application is complete. Do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion that the application is complete. Again, this just gets it started.
Correct.
We have still
Correct.
a long road ahead.
Is that your motion, Frank?
Yes, my motion is it's complete.
You could say that during discussion.
I could say it in fewer words too, right?
I don't know if you could. So we have a motion. We have a motion to, I'll second that. Further discussion, Frank,
Yes.
do you have anything further discussion?
No.
Okay,
not
like-
at this juncture.
Like Frank said, this just gets the ball rolling here, and then we still have a long way to go. Okay, so seeing no further discussion, roll call vote, Frank Underwood
Yes.
and Sean Winston.
Yes.
And I vote yes, so that's 3-0. So we will be doing a site walk on this. I think we want to go do a site walk on this. And the next available date, can we do it on the 16th?
Probably August 6th is the best.
August 6th.
Yeah, we already have 3 public hearings for July 16th, so it's already.
Well, do we have a site walk on the 16th?
We could do a sidewalk on the 16th, and then the hearing on the 6th.
Yeah. Let's do that.
Okay, yeah, if there's any outstanding issues that are found on the sidewalk, it gives you time to.
Yeah.
So July 16th is what I'm hearing?
Yep.
And what's the time on that?
We say 5 o'clock. Does that work for everybody?
Yes, that's fine with me.
Yeah.
That's fine by me.
Frank, you going to be out of quarantine by then?
Depends. I'm old. I am really holding my time by myself.
There you go. All right, 5 o'clock on the 16th. Do we want to, well, do we want to schedule tentatively right now for August 6th for a public hearing? Because we won't have the applicant come back on the 16th.
No.
We won't have them come back to the meeting. So we'll tentatively, are you sure that's August 6th? Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I have it on my. Pull up a calendar here. Yeah, August 6th.
August 6th, we'll do a public hearing. Okay. All right.
And hopefully, I mean, if this is as controversial as the other one, then the public will be weighing in on this, and we're gonna be going down that same road of how do we accommodate the
Sure.
public. And I know James has done a real good job in trying to make it available to the public to offer their comments, but we're right in the same neighborhood pretty much, so.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you
All
so
right.
much for your time.
Thank
So
you, Ken, and thank you, Lee.
July 16th site walk, August 6th public hearing?
Yes.
All right, see you then.
We're
All
taking
right.
the 4th off, the 4th weekend, our week off, so. I just found out, July 2nd, we get off at the town hall. I'm pretty pumped about that.
That's great, James.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. August 2nd, is that a Thursday?
August 6th.
No, I'm sorry, July 2nd? Is that a Thursday?
Thursday, yeah. We get it off because the 4th is.
It's Saturday, yeah. Okay.
Why would you get the 3rd off?
We have Fridays off too. We're spoiled.
Oh, well, there you go.
All right. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Lee. You can log off now. We're all done. Thank you. All right, next on the agenda is land use ordinance amendments. And I'd really like to wait to talk about some of your ideas until we have more of a full board here.
Okay.
Maybe throw some of those ideas out on email and tell everybody not to reply all,
Yeah,
and just get some feedback on them.
I can
And
just,
then bump, I don't know if, well, you could bump it to the agenda on the 16th, and if we get to it, we can get to it.
yeah,
But,
And throw in Christie Rabasca's ones for talking purposes.
yeah, okay, sure. Yeah, then that's for me.
okay. Next, we have no old business. Next is the public comment session. This is the second round of public comment. It's open to any resident or property owner here in the town of Berwick to talk about anything under the purview of the planning board. Public comment session is open. Feel free to come to the podium. Nobody in the waiting room?
Nope.
Okay, I'm seeing nobody in the waiting room. Close the public comment session. Next is informational items from the board or from staff. Does anybody on the board have anything for?
I have a couple. Why wouldn't I, right?
I know. By the way, where's Linda? What do you mean you're all by yourself?
Me?
Yeah, you said you're all by yourself.
Yeah, no one talks to me. I look like a grumpy cat with a beard. They don't even know who I am anymore in the house, so.
What do you got, Frank?
Just a couple things. Linda and I had a chance to take Pat and Paul out to the island to their cottage. It's been over a year. And first time he's been out there, and he's doing okay with a walker, and he's getting around and stuff. But he has 2 goals for next year, and you guys might like this, because one of them is he wants to get back on the planning board. And the other one is he wants to run his chainsaw. So I'm not sure how those 2 are all gonna play out, but those are his 2 goals for next year. And then I decided I'd share that with Niles. So I reached out to Niles, and Niles had made a promise to Paul that if Paul got back on the board, Niles would come back on the board. So
I was on the board.
things may be happening, guys, if some of these goals are met.
Long
And
time ago.
we still have an alternate slot too, if I remember right.
Correct, yes.
So
Okay,
there'll be opportunities.
all right. Is that it, Frank?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Well, thanks for passing that along. Good stuff. We miss Paul. I know he's probably watching right now, so. Sean, do you have anything?
Nope, nothing for informational items.
Okay, Jennifer?
I got nothing.
James?
And one more.
Hold on, I
No,
told,
You're done. You're done.
hold on a second, Frank. James, do you have anything?
I turned the paper over and I had one more on the back. I was able to watch the June 4th meeting. I wasn't able to get into it, but I watched it. And when we make or take a position where we use a general statement such as it's not consistent with the comprehensive plan or whatever, I just want to make sure that if we end up going down that road where we're citing the comprehensive plan, that we're pretty specific in what we're citing in the comprehensive plan.
I agree. And I went back and did my homework even more.
And I did go through the 1991 verbatim all the way through, and that was the basis for everything. And there are some good things in there, and there are some questionable things in there as it pertains to some of the activities that have been coming before us. But I just want to make sure we get some substance into these things going forward.
I think you're specifically talking about me, and I definitely will. I definitely do now.
And also Nicole. Nicole was pretty, I mean, she's our comprehensive person, and I think that she knows it, but I think we gotta be more specific in it.
Oh, I know. Absolutely.
The other thing I thought about is I did send you that April 28th set of minutes to the selectmen's meeting on the tree growth penalty.
Yep.
Remember, that was the solar array that I added 2 conditions in, and you put one in that lot 6A and 6B merged. And the other one was about a penalty being paid. And the selectmen at their 28th meeting had just voted 5-0 to assess the $15,000 penalty on LRB leasing for overcutting on the tree growth or not cutting something. And that was what I was trying to allude to. And I know Nicole quickly kind of poo-pooed it, saying all those cutting fees are paid, this, that, and the other. And you kind of glossed over it. But that's why I sent you that set of the minutes to that 28th meeting, Dave, so just look at it. The selectmen did specifically vote.
I don't remember seeing that email, Frank.
I'll send it again.
Okay.
But it was pretty specific, and I did follow it up with one to the town manager to have the town manager make sure he lets Chairman Andreessen know when the penalty has been paid.
Okay.
There's a couple of them floating around. I'll share that with you.
All right, thanks, Frank. All right, James?
Envision Berwick met this past, was it Tuesday
Yes.
this week? And we had like eight people, and we've been meeting monthly. So it's on the third Tuesday of the month. And everyone's welcome to come. We're building some momentum. And the Comprehensive Planning Committee meets on the second Thursday of each month. It's the same deal. We took a little bit of a break, and we're starting to really build some momentum. So a lot of good projects coming out, and a lot of good planning. Period.
Awesome.
Hey, tell Frank. Frank, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I figured out a way to map all impact fees. So next time you're out and about and you come into town hall,
Jen,
on
why don't you,
Tuesday, I'll show you.
Terry's going to yell at you and tell you to come to the podium.
Hi, Frank.
I
Can you hear me?
can hear you and see you.
Okay, listen. I'm going to. Do I have your email address?
James has it. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to email you. I'm going to show you what I did on the building permit Excel spreadsheet that we made. Sorry. I added a spot for impact fees, the date, rec, and open so that they're part of it. You're welcome.
And I think that's a very important piece going forward, especially when we're starting to see some of these other things come in. So.
You're welcome. Frank, you're welcome.
I'll keep an eye out for your car parked out front, all right?
Yeah, do it.
All right, if nobody has anything else, next on the agenda is the adjournment.
I will make a motion that we adjourn the June 18th planning board meeting for the town of Berwick.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Frank Underwood. All right, roll call vote. Frank?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
And I vote yes. That's 3-0. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.